The signal that changed everything. The night was quiet at the Deep Space Listening Station in Alaska. Snow covered the antennas, and the cold wind whispered across the empty valley. Inside the small control room, Dr. Sarah Kim, a radio astronomer, was sipping her coffee, half asleep over her computer screens. It had been another long, empty night. No signals, no surprises. Then, something strange happened. A soft beep broke the silence. The monitor flashed with strange repeating patterns, dots and dashes, repeating every 11 seconds. At first, Sarah thought it was a glitch. But then the pattern changed, forming a perfect mathematical sequence, prime numbers. Her heart stopped. Only intelligent life could send something like that. A command. "You're going to want to see this," she whispered into the radio. Within minutes, alarms went off across the global network. Scientists from NASA, ESA, and China's Deep Space Agency were all reporting the same signal, a message coming from Proxima Centauri, the nearest star to Earth. For the first time in human history, someone, or something, was calling Earth. Governments moved fast. The United Nations held emergency meetings. Satellites were redirected. Every country wanted to know the same thing. Who were they? And what did they want? The message continued for 6 straight hours before it stopped. The code was complex, filled with strange data blocks that looked like language, but not one humans had ever seen. The world held its breath as teams of linguists, AI models, and mathematicians tried to decode it. Meanwhile, social media exploded. Some people were terrified, others celebrated. News anchors smiled nervously while reading headlines like, "First contact confirmed, humanity no longer alone." After 3 weeks of decoding, the scientists finally cracked part of the message. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was a greeting. "We are the Elisari. We reach in peace." The message also contained coordinates, a meeting point in deep space, and a digital key, like an invitation. The aliens had reached out, offering communication through a special quantum frequency. World leaders debated for days. Should humanity respond? What if it was a trap? Dr. Kim sat quietly in the back of the conference room, listening as politicians argued. She didn't care about power or fame, she cared about the truth. Humanity had dreamed of this moment for centuries. If they didn't answer, they might never get another chance. Finally, the UN decided. Humanity would respond. A massive antenna array was built in orbit, the Humanity Beacon. It was the largest transmitter ever made, powered by fusion energy and linked through every major nation's AI systems. Sarah was chosen to lead the transmission. The message she and her team wrote was simple. "We are the people of Earth. We hear you. We come in peace." When the countdown hit 0, the beacon released a bright pulse, a burst of energy that traveled across the stars toward Proxima Centauri. Everyone waited. Hours passed. Then days. Then weeks. At last, a reply came. The monitors lit up again, but this time, the signal was different. The same alien frequency appeared, then suddenly, stopped. Nothing followed. Not a word. Not a sound. Just silence. At first, scientists thought it was a technical issue. Maybe the signal got lost. Maybe the Elisari didn't receive it. But then strange things began happening. Deep space probes started failing. Telescopes went offline without explanation. And in the static background of space, researchers began picking up something else. Faint whispers of code, almost like fear. Dr. Kim stayed late one night, analyzing the faint leftover signals. Her computer translated one small fragment of data that no one else had noticed before. When she read it, her blood ran cold. It said, "They were not meant to hear you." She stared at the screen, her mind racing. Who wasn't meant to hear them? Who sent that warning? And why did the Elisari stop responding the moment humans spoke back? Outside, the northern lights glowed across the sky, green and gold waves dancing in silence. But in that silence, Sarah felt something watching. Something vast. Something older than the stars. And it had just noticed humanity. The silence after the Elisari message was deafening. Days turned into nights, and yet the universe seemed different. Even in the daylight, Sarah Kim felt a chill she could not explain. The beacon had spoken, and something had listened, and now, it had responded in a way humans could not yet understand. One evening, while Sarah analyzed the faint remnants of the alien signal, her computer began to glitch. Lines of code appeared on the screen, not random errors, but a strange, repeating pattern. It looked like a heartbeat, but digital. "What the?" she whispered. Her fingers trembled as she tried to track the signal's source. Then it hit her. The pattern was coming from inside the solar system itself. The news shocked the world. A team of top scientists confirmed it. The signal wasn't from Proxima Centauri this time. It was coming from the outer edges of the Kuiper Belt, near Pluto. Something, or someone, was watching Earth. Governments panicked. Military satellites were deployed. Every spacecraft capable of traveling to the Kuiper Belt was launched. But even as probes raced across millions of miles of space, the signal vanished. Every time they tried to track it, it disappeared like a ghost. Sarah couldn't sleep. Night after night, she stared at the monitors, watching for even the tiniest flicker of alien activity. Then one night, as she reviewed the data alone, her screen exploded with static. A single phrase appeared, pulsing in bright green. "You spoke. You shouldn't have." Her heart pounded. She called her colleagues frantically. No one answered. The station's phone lines were dead. Even the internet was offline. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, ordinary people began noticing strange phenomena. Satellites flickered. GPS systems malfunctioned. People reported hearing low whispers in the static of radios. Faint, impossible to understand words that seemed to echo directly inside their minds. Some panicked. Some laughed it off as mass hysteria. But scientists like Sarah knew better. This was communication, but it wasn't like anything humanity had ever experienced. She started decoding the faint signals herself, working day and night. The patterns were unlike math, unlike language, it was emotional data. Fear, anger, curiosity, all compressed into pulses of code. And the strangest part? It seemed to react whenever she tried to transmit a human response. It was as if the universe itself was watching and testing them. At the same time, strange objects began appearing in orbit around Earth. They were small at first, tiny shards of metal, spinning like satellites. Then they grew larger. Observers around the world reported seeing massive, black triangular shapes moving silently across the sky. No one could explain them. Military radar failed to detect their engines. Cameras captured them only in fleeting glimpses. It was like they were phasing in and out of reality. Sarah watched one such object through her telescope. Its surface reflected sunlight in odd angles, almost like it was alive. Then, for a brief moment, it turned directly toward her station. She felt a strange sensation, as if it was staring back. And then it vanished. By now, it was clear, humanity's first response to the Elisari had awakened something else. Something ancient. Something that did not want humans talking to the stars. Sarah wrote her report to the UN. "We are being observed by something intelligent, but it is not the Elisari. I believe our transmission triggered a reaction. We are no longer alone, not in the way we imagined." World leaders argued. Some called for a complete shutdown of all space communications. Others insisted on sending a second human message, hoping to calm whatever had noticed them. Sarah knew better. She remembered the green phrase, "You spoke. You shouldn't have." It was a warning, not a greeting. One night, alone in the control room, Sarah sat at her desk, staring at the screen. Then she noticed something chilling. The faint heartbeat of digital code had stopped. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, in the dead quiet of the lab, she heard it. A whisper inside her mind, soft but unmistakable. "They are coming." Outside, the northern lights shimmered again, brighter than ever. But this time, they cast shadows that moved on their own, twisting and stretching as if something invisible was watching. And in that moment, Sarah realized humanity's first contact had already unleashed something bigger than any of them could imagine. The strange objects in Earth's orbit multiplied. Now, they weren't just small shards or triangles. Some were massive, bigger than any human spaceship. Their black surfaces reflected sunlight in unnatural ways, shimmering like oil on water. Radar and satellites couldn't track them consistently. They appeared and vanished without warning. At the Deep Space Listening Station, Dr. Sarah Kim watched in horror as one of the largest objects moved closer to the humanity beacon. The beacon's sensors detected a spike in energy, a signal, but not a message. More like a warning pulse. Sarah felt her chest tighten. This wasn't the Elisari. Whatever it was, it did not want humans in the stars. Across the world, people noticed changes in the sky. Cities reported unusual shadows moving against the night. Aircraft pilots described massive silhouettes crossing their flight paths, but when they tried to look closer, the objects seemed to dissolve into thin air. The world panicked. Some called for immediate military strikes. Others begged for diplomacy, but no one knew who or what to negotiate with. Meanwhile, Sarah's team decoded more fragments of the alien signals. Unlike the Elisari's greeting, these messages were emotional pulses, almost like raw thoughts: anger, warning, fear. And every time humanity tried to send a new message to Proxima Centauri, the pulses reacted violently, scrambling the beacon systems. It was as if something in space was alive, and very angry. One night, Sarah stayed late in the lab. She stared at the largest object in orbit. Her monitor flickered, and suddenly, a holographic shape appeared above her desk, faint but unmistakable. It was a symbol, rotating slowly in mid-air, formed from pulses of light. Sarah recognized it immediately. It was not alien language. It was Earth's ancient symbols, buried deep in myths and legends, symbols of protection, warning, and power. But why was something in space using them now? Her mind raced. The whispers from the signal returned, soft and urgent. You were not ready. You do not understand. Yet you came. A chill ran down her spine. The message wasn't addressed to her, it was addressed to all of humanity. Meanwhile, the world grew restless. Governments increased military patrols, satellites were armed, and space agencies scrambled to build defensive systems. But nothing could stop the objects. They moved too fast, vanished and reappeared unpredictably. In the sky, ordinary people began noticing patterns in the northern lights. The shimmering waves seemed to form shapes of ships, symbols, and faces. People whispered that the lights were alive. Some claimed they felt watched, as if unseen eyes followed them wherever they went. Sarah didn't sleep. Every night, she pored over the data, trying to understand why the objects reacted only when humans spoke back to the stars. Then, a breakthrough came, a terrifying breakthrough. The objects were tracking humanity's communication. Every message sent, every probe launched, every signal broadcast, was observed and logged. The reaction wasn't random. It was strategic. It wasn't just a warning. It was a calculation. Sarah realized the truth. The first contact with the Elisari hadn't only been noticed by them. It had awakened something else, something that had been waiting, watching from the dark edges of the solar system. She reported her findings to the UN. These objects are not friendly. They are older, stronger, and they see us as intruders. Every communication we send makes them respond. We must be extremely careful. Some world leaders wanted to ignore her warning. Some wanted to strike immediately. But Sarah knew, any wrong move could provoke them. Late that night, Sarah looked at the largest object again. Its shadow stretched across the earth, invisible yet immense. She felt something impossible, fear mixed with awe. And then, through the static on her monitor, came a whisper, clear and sharp. You cannot hide. You cannot stop what you began. Outside, the northern lights twisted violently, casting strange shadows across the snow. And in the heart of that beauty, Sarah felt one simple truth: humanity had made its first mistake by answering the stars. Something had noticed them. And now, it was watching. The world was tense. Every nation watched the sky, every telescope trained on the objects that haunted Earth's orbit. Humanity had answered the stars, and now, the consequences were clear. The objects were no longer silent. At the Deep Space Listening Station, Dr. Sarah Kim stared at her monitor, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. One of the largest objects had moved closer to the Humanity beacon. Its black surface seemed to ripple, almost alive, and then, a pulse of energy shot toward the beacon. The beacon shuddered violently. Lights flickered. Screens went blank. Alarms screamed across the station. "They're attacking," whispered Sarah, her voice trembling. Across the world, similar events unfolded. Satellites went offline, communication networks failed, and power grids in multiple countries surged and died in sudden bursts. People looked at the sky in panic, wondering if this was the end. Governments scrambled jets and space-capable weapons, trying to intercept the mysterious objects. Missiles were fired, lasers aimed, but nothing worked. The objects didn't move like normal spacecraft. They phased through energy shields, vanished from radar, and reappeared elsewhere, always closer to Earth. It was clear, humanity's technology was no match. Sarah realized something terrifying. The objects were not just attacking machinery, they were sending a message, a warning embedded in the disruption itself. She worked with AI systems to analyze the energy pulses. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Every strike followed a rule, an equation, a signal, a rhythm. It was deliberate, almost like communication through destruction. Someone, or something, was telling humanity, "Stop. You are not ready." Meanwhile, the emissaries' original message haunted Sarah. They had reached out peacefully, offering friendship. But humanity's response had unknowingly triggered the attention of a far older, far more dangerous force. Sarah realized, the warning wasn't just about technology or space. It was about humanity itself. In New York, people watched the sky as shadows of massive, triangular objects passed silently over the city. Windows shook, lights flickered, and a low hum vibrated in the air. Phones went dead, cars stalled, and panic erupted. Dr. Kim's voice trembled as she spoke to the UN via emergency conference. "This is not an attack we can fight with weapons. They are observing us, testing us. Every action, every signal we send, is being judged. Humanity must think carefully before acting again." For weeks, the world held its breath. No human died in the attacks, but the infrastructure damage was massive. And then came the real horror, the first human casualty. A deep space probe, sent to study the Kuiper Belt objects, was destroyed mid-flight. The destruction was precise. The probe wasn't just obliterated, its signals were scrambled, rewritten, almost as if the objects were erasing it from existence. Sarah watched in disbelief as the images came in. The probe's cameras captured a shadow, immense and impossible, moving faster than light seemed to allow. And then the feed ended. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. Sarah returned to the station that night, exhausted. The northern lights danced across the sky, brighter than ever, and in their glow, she swore she saw shapes moving, shadows far larger than anything on Earth. A whisper came again through the faint signals, softer than before but chilling. "You are young. You do not understand. We warned you." Her stomach dropped. The objects were not leaving. They were waiting, and humanity had only begun to scratch the surface of what they were dealing with. Sarah realized the terrifying truth: the first warning strike was not a threat. It was a lesson. And humanity had failed it. Outside, the sky remained alive with colors and shadows. The world waited silently, wondering what would happen next. Humanity had reached for the stars, and now, the stars were reaching back, with force far beyond imagination. Sarah clenched her fists. Humanity had a choice: retreat and hide, or fight knowing the universe had already marked them. The world had changed. Humanity's first contact with the Elisari had triggered something far older, far more dangerous. The objects in orbit were no longer just shadows, they were active watchers, and their patience was running thin. At the Deep Space Listening Station, Dr. Sarah Kim felt the pressure every second. Every monitor, every antenna, every AI system was working to track the strange signals. But the signals were unlike anything humans had experienced. They weren't just sound or light, they were thoughts, compressed and pulsing across space. And now, they spoke directly to the human mind. Sarah first noticed it while decoding the latest pulse. A strange vibration in the data made her head throb. Then, in the quiet of the lab, she heard it, a voice. Not through speakers. Not through radios. But inside her mind. "You reached too far," it whispered. Her hands froze over the keyboard. She looked around, expecting someone to be playing a trick. But she was alone. Then the voice spoke again. "You do not belong here." It wasn't human. It wasn't alien in the way the Elisari were. It was something older, colder, vast. Something that had existed long before Earth, long before humans. Across the globe, people began reporting similar experiences. Pilots in the skies heard whispers in their heads. Astronauts on the International Space Station felt sudden chills and irrational fear. Children stared at the night sky and spoke words they didn't understand. Scientists realized the objects weren't just watching. They were communicating telepathically, sending warnings that humans could barely comprehend. Sarah knew one thing: humanity's first response had triggered something very intelligent, very patient, and very dangerous. The UN held emergency sessions. Some countries wanted to strike at the objects. Others argued for silence. But Sarah's team warned, every signal humanity sent made the objects more active, more aware, more hostile. To understand the threat, Sarah volunteered to be part of a deep space probe mission. The plan was risky. The probe would carry a powerful AI, capable of decoding the object's communication patterns and transmitting them back to Earth. The world watched as the probe launched. Every eye was on the screen as it moved toward the outer edge of the solar system. Days later, the probe transmitted its first data. What it recorded made scientists' hair stand on end. The objects in orbit weren't alone. Far beyond Pluto, in the darkness of the Kuiper Belt, something massive stirred. The probe captured faint outlines of shapes larger than moons, moving silently. Energy readings suggested intelligence, planning, coordination. The AI on board tried to communicate. A simple greeting, a test of understanding. The response was immediate. The probe's cameras recorded a flash of impossible light, faster than anything human eyes could track. The signal that followed was direct. Inside the AI's core, pulses of thought entered its circuits like fire. And for the first time, humanity understood the words. "You are not ready. You will not last." Sarah watched the transmissions in horror. The objects, the shadows, the massive forms beyond Pluto, all were alive in a way humanity couldn't comprehend. And now, they had started to judge humanity. She realized the truth. The universe was not neutral. Humanity had assumed it could reach out, speak, and be heard. But in doing so, they had awakened something ancient, something that viewed humans as children playing with fire. That night, Sarah stayed at the station long after everyone else left. She stared at the northern lights, which seemed brighter than ever, and she felt the weight of the universe watching her. And then she heard it again. Not a voice, but a thought. "They are fragile. They will try. But they cannot endure what comes." Her heart pounded. Humanity had crossed a line, and whatever was watching, it was preparing to act. Sarah knew one thing for certain. Humanity had no idea what true danger was. The Elisari had been a warning. The shadows in orbit were a test. And the voices from the abyss, they were the beginning of judgment. The stars were no longer silent. Humanity had spoken. And now, the universe was answering. The probe's last transmission had shaken humanity to its core. Beyond Pluto, in the dark void of the Kuiper Belt, Massive forms stirred, shapes bigger than moons, moving with deliberate intelligence. Sarah Kim stared at the live feed, her hands shaking. This was no longer a mystery. This was an awakening. The objects in orbit over Earth had been only scouts. Now, the masters were stirring. Across Earth, satellites and telescopes picked up unusual energy surges. Solar storms could not explain them. The energy patterns resembled breathing. The universe itself seemed to inhale and exhale. The whispers returned, not in one person's mind now, but across humanity's communication networks. Phones, radios, computers, all carried faint, terrifying messages. We awaken. You cannot stop what you have begun. Governments panicked. Cities lit up with alarms. People screamed in confusion as power grids flickered and strange auroras appeared in skies worldwide, glowing green, violet, and gold. It was beauty and terror at once. Sarah knew humanity's only hope was understanding. She and her AI team worked around the clock, analyzing the probe's final data. Patterns emerged. The distant objects beyond Pluto were reacting to human signals, adapting with intelligence that no AI could fully predict. They were not just alive. They were thinking, learning, and preparing. In orbit, the shadow objects began forming geometric formations around Earth. Circles, triangles, and hexagons rotated slowly, casting eerie shadows over cities. The largest object hovered over the North Pole. Its surface shimmered, reflecting northern lights in unnatural angles. Sarah realized something horrifying. These formations were more than observation, they were shaping Earth itself. Humanity had assumed space was empty. But now it was clear, Earth was the stage, and the universe was awakening around it. The probe's AI decoded one fragment of alien thought. Species, fragile. Intelligence, untested. Communication, premature. Consequence, imminent. The AI translated it as a warning. But the tone wasn't neutral, it was judgmental, impatient, and cold. Sarah's hands trembled as she read it aloud to the UN. Everyone in the room went silent. The full weight of the message sank in. Humanity's first contact had not only been noticed, it had been judged. Then came the most disturbing signal yet, a pulse from the Kuiper belt, traveling faster than any human-made wave. The AI interpreted it as movement toward the inner solar system. Whatever had been sleeping, waiting in the darkness, was now on the move. Panic spread across Earth. Military forces prepared defense satellites, and worldwide alarms sounded. But Sarah knew weapons were useless. The intelligence observing humanity was older, faster, stronger, and beyond comprehension. Sarah's mind raced. The Elisari had reached out in peace, but humanity's response had awakened something far older, far larger, far more dangerous. This was no longer about diplomacy or first contact. This was about survival. She stared at the monitor as the largest objects formed a perfect circle around Earth. Shadows stretched across continents. The northern lights flared violently, and whispers echoed across communication networks. We awaken. Prepare. You cannot hide. Sarah's heart pounded. Humanity had spoken to the stars. And now, the universe itself had answered with force beyond imagining. She knew the final confrontation was approaching. The choice was clear. Humanity could either fight, flee, or try to reason with something older than the stars themselves. But deep in her gut, Sarah felt one truth. This was not the end of the universe, it was the beginning of humanity's test. Outside, the northern lights danced like fire, shadows moving within them as if the universe itself had opened its eyes. Humanity had reached for the stars. And now, the stars were reaching back. The night sky burned with colors humanity had never seen. The northern lights twisted into impossible shapes, shadows dancing across continents. The massive objects beyond Pluto were moving closer, forming a perfect circle around Earth. Humanity held its breath. At the Deep Space Listening Station, Dr. Sarah Kim stared at the monitors. Every antenna, every sensor, every AI system was working at maximum power, but nothing could truly prepare them. The whispers from the universe pulsed through all communications. You spoke. You awakened. You will endure. Sarah's heart pounded. This was it, the final moment. Humanity's first contact with the Elisari had unleashed something far older, far larger, far more powerful. Something that saw humans as fragile children daring to touch the stars. Governments tried every defense. Satellites armed with missiles, laser arrays, energy shields, all failed. The objects phased through energy fields, vanished from radar, and reappeared closer to Earth. Humanity realized we could not fight with weapons alone. Sarah knew the answer was not in destruction. It was in humanity itself. The Elisari's original message came back to her. We reach in peace. It was simple. It was clear. Humanity had assumed the universe would respond with aggression, but the Elisari had been an invitation to grow, to understand, to prove our worth. Sarah made a bold decision. She activated the Humanity Beacon one last time. Not to fire a signal in science, but to send humanity's true message, our hope, our courage, our unity, and our determination to survive. We are humans. We are small, fragile, and young. But we are here. We will endure. We come in peace, and we will learn. The pulse shot into the void. For a moment, the universe was silent. The shadows in orbit froze. The massive objects beyond Pluto hovered, unmoving, as if listening. Then, something unimaginable happened. The whispers returned, not with anger, but with curiosity. The shadows began to recede slowly. The massive forms beyond Pluto shifted back, vanishing into the dark reaches of the solar system. The geometric formations around Earth dissolved. The northern lights calmed. Sarah exhaled, tears streaming down her face. Humanity had survived its first trial. But the universe had changed forever. Across the globe, people stared at the sky in awe and fear. Humanity had spoken to the stars, and the stars had listened. They had not destroyed humanity, but they had marked Earth as awake, as aware, as capable of growth. Sarah knew the truth. The Elisari had been a gift, the shadows a test, and humanity had passed, not by weapons, but by understanding, courage, and unity. As calm returned to the world, Sarah looked at the night sky. The northern lights shimmered gently, shadows gone, but a faint pulse lingered. A reminder. A promise. Humanity had reached the stars. And the stars had acknowledged them. But deep in her mind, Sarah felt it too. This was only the beginning. The universe was alive, patient, and watching. And humanity, fragile as it was, had now earned its first place among the stars. She smiled, exhausted but hopeful. Humanity had survived. Humanity had grown. Humanity had said, "We are here. And we will endure." The stars were silent again, for now.